Hey, well, we're back at Chaplain Chat, and if you didn't see part one of Norris the Vet, go back on my YouTube and see it because this is part two. I put three, two, and we're at Norris's home right now doing this recording. And Norris, again, I want to thank you for, and I'm excited because we were there for part one. Now I want to be there. This is part
Well, thank
two.
you.
I guess we could call this. No, it's bigger than the Manhattan Project, but I hope you
That was
saw.
just the name.
That was just a name. I hope you saw part one, but let's get into part two.
Sure. Okay. Part one, we dealt with occurrences that happened that all in some way became part of the Manhattan Project in one way or another, some stronger than others. But by 1943, the war was raging in both Europe and Japan. And the war in Japan, war against Japan, I should say, they were in desperate need of long range bombers because they needed to start bombing the Japanese homeland if they were going to succeed in this war. The There had been a developing bomber at Boeing that would be called the B-29 that had been in development since 1940. Yeah, and it would be a long range bomber. And
When you say long range, does that mean high up or low?
no distance.
Okay, gotcha. All
Distance,
right, I
yes.
gotcha. Thank you.
Because the islands that they would be stationed on, for instance, the island that we were stationed on was 1,400 miles
Oh,
from Japan.
gotcha.
You need a long-range bomber, and the bombers they had at that point did not have that kind of range. But you got there maybe, but you couldn't get back.
Okay, that.
It's necessary to have a round trip. Anyhow, uh, the Army Air Corps desperately needed those airplanes, and the development of this B-29 was to the point that they started test flying it. However, problems, all kinds of problems with it. It was crashing, and it very shortly earned the name of a flying coffin because,
God.
yeah, it was very dangerous. So the Army Air Corps, in their desperation for needing that airplane, decided that they needed their own test pilot to come and fly the bugs out of that thing to find out why it was performing the way it was and recommend the modifications to the manufacturing to correct those. And so they put out a name search for the ideal person that could handle that. They went to General Spatz, and he came back with a response. There's only one man that I would recommend, Paul W. Tibbets. And so Paul W. Tibbets was brought back to the United States in February of 1943 to fly the bugs out of the B-29. So he became the test pilot, and he was quite successful in figuring out why the airplane was performing the way it was so they could make the corrections and get it flyable. Because it had developed that title, Flying Coffin,
Yeah.
all the young pilots that were waiting for assignments to groups that were forming shied away from signing up.
I would too.
Yeah,
God, yeah.
blame them. And they just shied away from it. They didn't want to be part of it. Well, the Army Air Corps approached Paul Tibbets and said, if you can think of a way, since you're working on this flying bugs out of this thing.
Now, by the way, there's some music going on in the background.
Oh, that's just my silly clock.
That's okay.
That's
That's
a crazy thing.
a,
If you look up there,
it sounded, it was appropriate. Like, whoa, the music. All right, go ahead. Yeah.
it's almost through.
Oh, that's fine. You're doing great.
There we go. God, I forgot where it was. Anyhow, they asked him if he could come up with an idea to entice these young pilots to get involved in the B-29 program. So he pondered what to do. And one day he saw this airplane coming in for a landing. It was a B-26, a twin-engine bomber. And the plane landed, made a perfect landing, taxied up to the revetment, and he looked and he couldn't see a pilot in there. So he waited and waited, and finally the pilot got out, two young women.
Ah!
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dora Doherty was a pilot, and Dee Dee Moorman was her co-pilot. And he thought, well, boy, they are excellent pilots. So the thought occurred to him, why don't I check these two ladies out on the B-29 and let them just fly around to these different bases, doing landings, takeoff and landings, to you show the young men that women can fly the thing. Somehow or other, all of a sudden, the young men started signing up for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
hooray, hooray
My,
for the women.
my wife's in the background. She's
Yeah.
chuckling on that too. All right.
She has a right to.
Yeah.
So that's end of 1943. Well, in 1943, I'm entering into the picture now. I was a 17-year-old high school student looking ahead to the end of the school year coming up, but also looking forward to June 11 when I would turn 18. And that would be just right after school closed. And I would have to register for the draft. And I did not want to be drafted. If you're drafted, they put you where they want you. And I didn't want that. I wanted to select my own branch of service that I wanted to be in. So I talked to my dad, and he agreed with me, and he said he'd sign for me to go ahead and enlist. So uh, the day before I was 18, 17-year-old Norris Jernigan raised his right hand and was sworn into the Army Air Corps cadet program. I was going to become a pilot, no question about it. Well, things don't always turn out the way you plan, and after 3 months in the program, they had so many uh, young guys that had the same uh, dream that I had of becoming a pilot that they had to trim them down. So they eliminated out of my school squadron, 2/3 of them were eliminated out.
Wow.
And so that meant we were out of the cadet program, but we were still in the Army Air Corps. Um, Sent in different directions, I wound up being sent to a distribution center in Salt Lake City, where they were filling vacancies at different bases that needed personnel. Well, they were forming a new B-29 group in Fairmont, Nebraska, Fairmont Army Air Base. And they needed a mass of men there, so a bunch of us were shipped to Nebraska. And we were divided into 3 groups, and we became squadrons, and became the squadrons of the 504th Bomb Group. 393rd, I was assigned to the 393rd Bomb Squadron, and we were sent there as on-the-job trainees instead of sending us to trade schools first. Went ahead and started sending the young men to tactical units that were training for overseas duty as on-the-job trainees. So they could learn the job on the job.
Wow. Wow.
I was sent there as a truck driver. One of the guys in the orderly room, which was our administrative office, going through the personnel records, noted that I had been in the cadet program and had just completed a semester at Denver University in that program. Called me in and said, I see you were part of the cadet program. What are you doing driving a truck? I said, well, you don't argue, you just go where they tell you. So he said, you know, there's an opening in the intelligence office of the 393rd Bomb Squadron. They need somebody that can also type. And I said, well, I took typing in high school. I didn't tell him I flunked the course. But
That's okay.
I flunked the course because one of the requirements is you had to do homework, and I didn't have a typewriter at home. So because of that, I was given an F and flunked the program. I didn't tell him.
But you didn't tell them that.
No,
No.
none of their business.
There you go. Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyhow, we went into training at Fairmont, Nebraska, under the 504th Bomb Group. And by the end of summer 1944, we were all through with training and ready to go overseas, waiting for our overseas assignment. When orders came through separating the 393rd Bomb Squadron from the 504th Bomb Group and sending us to Wendover, Utah. Where in the world is Wendover, Utah? Well, we got there, and it was not that exciting. It was not the base that we just left. It was really quite an old base, and not as attractive as where we came from. But anyhow, about the next day after we got settled in, we were called to assemble. And this lieutenant colonel got up and addressed us and said, gentlemen, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, and I've been given the assignment to head up a new group. And your squadron, because of your high level of scoring and training, has been selected to be the bomb squadron of this new group. The thing is, we'll be handling a new secret weapon that, if successful, should shorten the war by at least 2 years. He said, "It's this top secret. You're not to mention to anybody what you're doing or even where you're stationed. When you walk off of the base here, you don't tell anybody that you're stationed at Wendover. It's a taboo. You cannot talk about it." He said, "Now we're going to be going into some very intensive training, and I want you to all, as of now, go on a 2-week leave. Go home, get rested up, and come back because we're going to be in very intensive training for the next few months." What we didn't know is he could care less about whether we got rested or not. It was a test to see how many of us could keep our mouths shut about being stationed at Wendover or whatever. Um, how I survived that, I don't know, but I like to talk to people, brag a little bit.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, we all left. A lot of the guys, when they got home, had telegrams waiting for them to report back to the base immediately. Apparently, they had said something to somebody and leaked something that we weren't supposed to talk about. Even
Wow.
we were stationed. Yeah.
So they did it right away, and so they got home. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was one story that we never did find out whether it was true or not, but it certainly grabbed our attention. This young man, waiting for his transportation, uh, decided to go in the bar and have a drink. So we went and sat down at the bar and having a drink, and this Catholic priest came in and sat down beside him. "Hello, my son. See, you're in the military." "Oh, yes, Father." "Oh, really? Well, where are you stationed?" "Wendover, Utah." "Wendover? What in the world are you doing out of Wendover, of all places?" "Well, we're not sure. Some kind of a secret project we're going to be involved in. We don't know what it is at this point, but anyhow, he had a telegram waiting for him when he got home. Report back to the base immediately. When he walked back on the base, guess who greeted him in a business suit? An FBI man that had posed as a priest.
I was just wondering. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So,
You don't know if that's true, but still, there may have been some other. Maybe even you were set up in some way and you didn't know that. And so I'm
convinced I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you keep your yes?
So we learned afterwards that we were infiltrated by, I forgot how many, 20, 30 FBI people.
Wow.
That came in as replacements for jobs that were open. That you never knew whether your fellow worker is really a military or FBI. Yeah.
Wow.
So we learned early to keep our mouths shut about the project. At that point, we became part of the Manhattan Project. And of course, the Manhattan Project was to research and develop and construct an atomic bomb and deliver it to Japan. We had nothing to do with the research or the development, just the delivery. And that was the job of the 393rd Bomb Squadron, 509th Composite Group. On December 17, 1944, the 509th Composite Group was activated, and it was made up of a headquarters squadron, our 393rd Bomb Squadron. We were going to be the only bomb squadron in the group. The 320th Troop Carrier Squadron, they had one squadron that just flew large 4-engine transport planes, transporting people around, high brass and scientists and so forth. A 603rd Engineering Squadron that would be doing very heavy maintenance on the airplanes and reconstruction of them. Their own Air Material Squadron. 1st Ordnance Squadron, and their job was to make the final assembly on the bombs. And the 1395th Military Police. The military police were very active in our group, and anytime there was a meeting pertaining to the project, there would be 2 military police on either side of the door, because they usually had those briefings in the chapel. And when you saw them, you know that was off limits. There was something big going on in there. And Lieutenant Colonel Paul W. Tibbets was designated the group commander of this new outfit, because he had been so successful in the Europe and North Africa, and then getting the bugs out of the B-29, that he was given this command over people that were already full colonels, which didn't set well with full colonels. That a lieutenant colonel would be given such a responsibility. But his job was to put together a group and train them and get them ready for overseas duty. But then 1945 rolled around, intense training really started kicking in. And a lot of our crews would disappear for days. When they'd come back, where you guys been? I can't tell you.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were using a bombing range in Southern California to drop these big bombs. And they had developed a 10,000-pound bomb just to get the training of flying with one big 10,000-pound bomb. Yeah. And so we never were able to find out anything about what they did over there. But that was okay. It was none of our business. We didn't want to make it our business either. So April 12th, 1945, President Roosevelt died suddenly. And Vice President Harry Truman became the President of the United States. When Harry Truman raised his hand and was sworn in as President of the United States, the first thing that he had to be briefed on was the atomic bomb project. He had no knowledge whatsoever. Roosevelt elected not to get him in on that knowledge, which I think was wrong, absolutely wrong. By the end of April 1945, we began gearing up for moving to overseas. We'd be going from Wendover, Utah to the island of Tinian in the Marianas. The three largest islands of the Marianas group is Guam, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, Saipan, and then Tinian, and the numerous other smaller islands that are of no significance, or at least we didn't think they were. However, after the war was over, on one of the smaller islands, they found a couple thousand Japanese troops still over there on that island that had been isolated.
They didn't know.
Yeah, from their homeland, so they, yeah. Anyhow, on May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered, and the United States began immediately transferring men from the European theater to the Pacific, getting ready for the big invasion of the Japanese homeland. I didn't feel that was fair. Those guys had fought their war already. Take them home. But no, they were moving them over there because it was going to be a massive invasion. Once on Tinian, more training kicked in, and by the middle of June, all of our aircraft were over there, and they started flying 10,000-pound TNT bombs as practice bombs all the way to Japan and dropping them. It didn't do the damage that the atomic bomb would do, but a 10,000-pound TNT bomb does a lot of damage. But that was their practice missions. By July, President Truman was at the Potsdam Conference in Potsdam, Germany, meeting with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin to map out the completion of the war in the Pacific. And at that conference, they drafted a proclamation called the Potsdam Proclamation against the Empire of Japan, demanding full surrender, full and complete surrender, and was conveyed to Japan. The time came when one of the bombs should be tested. They were at that point where they needed to test one to see if they were on target. So they constructed a steel tower down on the New Mexico White Sands Proving Ground. The steel tower, 100 feet tall, and hoisted a plutonium bomb to the top of that tower and detonated it from there. The reason for that is atomic bombs do not explode on impact. They're detonated above ground because what they are is just a big, massive fireball. And you detonate them above ground, they're going to spread out more, do more damage. So that's where we were then. President Truman received word that the test had been successful, and now it became his responsibility for the next step. Do we use it? And that was his baby. And after contemplating for a couple of days, he decided, I cannot let this war go on one more day without doing something that might bring it to a stop. So he gave us the green light to proceed.
Oh, that's just part two, people. Um, we're going to get to part three. I don't know if they're all going to come out at the same time on my YouTube, but boy, if you haven't seen one, see one. This is part two, and we're still going to do part three. We'll see it. Part three with Norris the vet.